Welcome to Family Law Talk. Family Law Talk. Presented by Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm, PC. Stange Law Firm is a multi-state family law firm. Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is how a divorce can impact your financial state. And this episode today is based on an article on our blog, TulsaDivorceLawyersBlog.com, dated May 8th, 2024. And the title of that article is How Divorce Affects Your Finances. So as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to that blog and check out the article on the same topic for more information. But let's go ahead and jump on in. The reality of the situation is that divorce can impact somebody's finances, and it can do it in a real significant way with an impact that is not only short-term, but it can be long-term. And so for lots of parties, they might come in to divorce in a certain financial state, but coming out of it, it could be a totally different ballgame. And it can really be stressful. It can cause a party to have to kind of reorganize their life in terms of their spending and maybe the lifestyle that they had before. And I know for lots of individuals that might not be what they want to hear, but the truth of the matter is a divorce is a really traumatic event that can really impact somebody's financial state. Now, look, if an individual is smart about what they do, if they hire competent legal counsel and they take the appropriate steps, then maybe they can come out a little bit better than they would have otherwise. But certainly for individuals going into divorce, it's important to be very proactive in terms of how they deal with certain issues in terms of the divorce itself and their finances. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the financial effects that divorce can have on an individual. Obviously, one of the big ones is the divorce proceedings itself. Hiring an attorney can be expensive. And certainly in some cases, expert witnesses are needed. There might be a guardian ad litem. There could be court costs, things like deposition costs, subpoena costs, you name it. And so the divorce itself can be hurtful to somebody's finances just in terms of the cost of the divorce itself. So it's important for a party to really think this through out of the gates. Who do they want to hire to be their lawyer? What are their rates? What approach they want to take to the case itself, because that decision can be a real big one. Certainly out of the gates, one of the big financial hits can be the cost of hiring a lawyer. Okay, one of the other effects of a divorce can be the property division. Obviously, coming into a divorce, most individuals have some property and debt. Obviously, some have more property and debt than others. But coming out of a divorce, obviously that marital property and that marital debt is going to be divided in an equitable manner. So for most parties coming out of a divorce, they come out with less than what they had coming in. And that can ultimately have a big financial impact on an individual moving forward. Support payments can be a big issue that can cause a financial impact on an individual. Take an individual who has to make child support payments or spousal maintenance payments, that can significantly impact somebody's finances coming out of a divorce. So it's really important to really think that component through in terms of the disposition of the case. If child support is going to be awarded or spousal maintenance is going to be awarded, it's important to really sit down with your lawyer, go through the finances, and it might make sense to sit down with a financial advisor or whoever advises somebody in terms of money issues. Some families have kind of like an informal CFO, somebody who advises them on finances. So really thinking that through, going through that with somebody, coming up with a plan can be very important, because ultimately, look, if an individual is losing half of their assets or a significant portion of their assets because it's being awarded to the other spouse, and now they're paying child support, now they're paying spousal maintenance, that can have a big impact on an individual's finances. One of the other things that individuals probably don't think about enough, but in a divorce, again, the marital property and the marital debt, it's going to be divided, and that oftentimes means the 401k is divided in some manner. If there's an investment account, maybe that's divided in a certain manner. Certainly individuals who have pensions, stuff like that through their employers, maybe that gets subject to a quadro, which is known as a qualified domestic relations order. And so the impact that can come into play for some individuals is they might have had a certain date in mind where they planned on retiring. Maybe they wanted to retire early. let's say, and they built up some assets. I mean, the truth of the matter is after divorce, assets get depleted on attorney fees, the marital property and debt is divided. If there's child support and spousal maintenance, and now the retirement plans have been split, it's unfortunate, but for some individuals, they might have to end up working longer than they originally wanted to prior to the divorce, and that is just an unfortunate reality, but the truth for many individuals, all right? Some individuals suffer lowered income after the divorce itself. And think about this for a moment. If it's a marriage where both individuals are working and then you've got this combined income, then the standard of living is higher. But once you encounter a situation where now you don't have two incomes coming in, you got one income coming in, that can result in a lower income, which can cause a party to have to kind of change the way they spend money and do things in their life. So that would be scenario one. And then obviously, as we talked about before, if a person's making a certain amount of money and now child support and spousal maintenance is coming out of it, they've got a lowered income and they have to kind of restructure what they're doing. This is why some individuals, after divorce have to do all kinds of things, or, even during the divorce, like sell the house and get a smaller house. Do things to sort of change that standard of living to fit in terms of where an individual is at financially now. Obviously, divorce can have some tax consequences too. So obviously, when people are married, they file a joint tax return. There could be some benefits to that as opposed to when somebody's filing separately. Certainly, being able to claim the kids can have an impact as well. So if an individual was able to claim the kids and maybe they're not able to now, that can have a tax consequence too. So the taxes can be another issue coming out of a divorce that can really impact things. All right. So past that, then what lots of individuals ask is, well, how can I protect myself? What are the steps I should take in order to protect myself through the divorce and come out in the best possible way that I can? Now, that's a question a lot of individuals have. I mean, in other words, how do I minimize the damage, okay? And again, this list isn't all-inclusive, but these are just some tips that might fit for certain individuals that are listening to this podcast today. But one of the big things is looking at the assets that you have going into the divorce and really determining what did you have coming into the marriage, because assets that were acquired prior to the marriage are separate property. But what ends up happening in a lot of instances is the longer term the marriage is, these assets often get commingled. So separate property gets commingled with marital property, but being able to trace out the separate property can be really important for a lot of individuals. And it might mean hiring a forensic accountant or some kind of financial expert to come in and be able to trace out from an investment account or a 401k or other assets what the value was at the time of the marriage, and trying to get credit for that off the top before these assets are just split in an equitable manner in the divorce, okay? Another good step to take is save money where you can. So maybe spend differently. If there's things you're spending money on in your life and you don't need it, maybe it's the time to cut it out. Maybe you can do other things to save some money as well. Like I said, sell the house, get a cheaper house. Maybe shop in different places that are less expensive. Maybe cut back on travel a little bit. Maybe buy an automobile that costs less. But really trying to tweak that budget to fit for the state that an individual is in can be really important, because the truth is, lots of individuals can't spend after the divorce like they spent before. All right, it's also important to list the likely legal costs of the divorce and trying to come up with a plan in terms of how those are going to get paid. So that can be a big key out of the gates. And again, making a smart decision about the attorney an individual is hiring can be a big key too. All right, out of the gates, trying to really look at the marital assets and come up with a plan for what it is you want and what it is maybe you don't want that you would be fine with this other spouse getting in the divorce. That can be key. And then maybe there's some stuff where you're on the fence on. But really coming up with a plan out of the gates to give to the attorney can be a big key. What assets do you really want? What assets are you not really worried about? And what assets are you on the fence? Because the truth is, not everything is necessarily just divided in half. Oftentimes, That isn't the case at all. As long as it comes to a roughly proportionate distribution when you total each party's columns, that can work. But coming up with a plan can be a key. Again, gather relevant financial information and create a new personal budget. Big key. Come up with a budget, be conservative, and that could be a huge key when going into a divorce and really coming out of a divorce as well. All right, other questions individuals have on this topic, which are how are assets and debts divided in a divorce? And the reality is that most states in the United States are what are called equitable distribution states. And if you are in a state which is an equitable distribution state, what it means is the court divides marital property and debt in a just manner when considering all the statutory factors. Now, just manner doesn't necessarily mean equal. Lots of individuals assume that everything is going to be divided 50-50, maybe, but not necessarily. It just has to be a just division. So, there could be cases where it's 55-45, 60-40. It's hard for a judge to make things exactly equal, but just division is how most states divide marital property and debt. In terms of what a party is entitled to in a divorce, in terms of some of the relevant issues like property and debt division, child support, and spousal support. Well, look, we've talked about property and debt. That's equitable division. Child support, there's going to be a formula in your state, and the key is going to be sitting down with a lawyer and going through the child support formula. But to do a child support formula, you have to have accurate information on income and expenses for the kids and health insurance and whatnot typically. But really computing the child support charts can be a key out of the gate, so you know generally what's going to happen. And then in terms of spousal maintenance, this is going to vary big time based on what state you're in. Some states keep it pretty open for a judge to make a determination based on income and expenses. Other states have kind of moved more toward formula-driven spousal maintenance, much like child support. So you want to speak to a lawyer to determine how that is determined in your particular state. All right. Another question individuals have is, ultimately, how financially damaging is a divorce? How bad can it be? And the truth is, it can be bad. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. When you're paying for lawyers, attorney fees, court costs, filing fees, deposition costs, subpoena fees, all these things, it can be quite expensive. And then when you're dividing your assets in half and now maybe income is dropped, it can be really quite damaging. So individuals should at least consider and contemplate alternative dispute resolution like mediation and collaborative divorce. Where it's possible, it could be a good thing. Obviously, it's not always possible, but to the extent that it is, it's worth trying. For a lot of individuals, it can keep the attorney fees down and result in a disposition that both parties can at least live with. But, it's easier said than done for a lot of individuals, but it's definitely something to at least consider. Again, another question which I kind of hit on briefly, but I'll reference it again. But, how is spousal maintenance determined in states? I know some states still refer to it as alimony, but lots of states have really moved away from that term. And again, it's going to vary based on the statute in the state in which any listener listening to this podcast lives in. So it's important to speak with a lawyer about the laws in their particular state because, again, there could be quite a bit of variance. But some factors that generally come into play when you look at this in a generic sense in most states would be the income of the parties and their financial resources, what's an individual's ability to even pay support after they're meeting their own expenses. The length of the marriage can be an important factor that courts look at. The age of the parties and their health can come into play. Courts oftentimes can look at the disposition of property in addition to spousal maintenance together, kind of take these two things together. The standard of living during the marriage could be a factor courts look at. Obviously, it's hard to maintain it exactly the same, but courts can look at that. And then there could be a litany of other factors that courts look at. Some states allow the court to look at the conduct of the parties during the marriage, in other words, marital fault. Some states don't allow for that. So speak to a lawyer who's licensed and competent to practice law in your jurisdiction about that specific factor. But again, in a nutshell, some states have formulas for spousal maintenance, and they even have time limitations based on things like the length of the marriage. Lots of states don't have that at all. And it can be very much to the discretion of the judge in terms of how spousal maintenance is going to work. Missouri would be one of those cases, which is a state where I have predominantly practiced during my career, but definitely speak to a lawyer in your jurisdiction who understands how spousal maintenance works, and they'll be able to give you more details in terms of what may or may not happen in your particular case, all right? Well, look, that was the topic at hand today. Definitely an interesting topic, one that lots of individuals ask about. As a follow-up to the episode today, again, go on over to TulsaDivorceLawyersBlog.com, read the article dated May 8th, 2024, titled How Divorce Affects Your Finances. It'll give you more information. But thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned to our next episode on Family Law Talk coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Family Law Talk with Kirk Stange. Visit StangeLawFirm.com for more about today's topic, or to put Stange Law Firm to work for your family today. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri or Illinois reviews or approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The information you obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us and welcome your calls, letters, and electronic mail. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please do not send any confidential information to us until such time as an attorney-client relationship has been established. Past results afford no guarantee of future results, and every case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Kirk Stange is responsible for the content. Headquarters, Office 120 South Central Avenue, Suite 450, Clayton, Missouri 63105. Kirk Stange is licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas.